Georgia football is in a bizarro world, and you probably didn't even notice. That's what we're going to talk about tonight on this edition of the How About That Dogs Cast. This week is the week that all of the SEC coaches get together in Destin, Florida, and hash some things out. So when they took off down there to the beautiful blue waters of Destin, the white sandy beaches, a couple of topics were going to be at top of mind. First was going to be what was going on in the CFP. The next was going to be how are we going to figure out future scheduling inside the conference? And of course, the thing that has to be addressed is what are we going to do with the transfer portal? All those things were on the table, and there was just so much stuff going on this week that, well, we have to talk about it. So we're going to start at the very beginning, which is that college football, in terms of the college football playoff, they actually did something right recently. And that was they voted unanimously to switch from the discombobulated seeding system that came together in 2024, where you had teams outside the top 8 somehow now being put inside the top 8 simply because of the way the seeding was done. They decided to go to a straight seeding format, which is going to simplify this for everybody involved and just make good horse sense for all of us. So the way it looks is like this. The 12-team college football playoff will move to a straight seeding model this fall, effective immediately. So there is no like, we're going to do it in 26. It's happening right now. Rewarding the selection committee's top 4 teams with the top 4 seeds and a first round bye. So actually, that's exactly how it's supposed to work. So the committee gets together, they lay out their top 12, and then the top 4 out of that top 12 are going to get a bye, and they're going to be rewarded for earning their position in the top 4. Straightforward, exactly as it should be. And then the next 4, you can talk about home games and all that sort of stuff, just like we did this past season. So any way you cut it, this looks like a good move, not only for the college football playoff, but for college football as a whole, right? Because the fact that you would have a Boise State, no disrespect, up there hosting a game or getting an advantage when they weren't actually in the top 4 or top 8, then that didn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, the way it's laid out, everybody's going to end up wherever the committee puts them, but at least we're all going to be able to follow that straight line about what was going on. So once that happened at a national level, the SEC decided to get together, and now we have to work out some stuff inside the conference so that when Commissioner Greg Sankey goes back out to have these national discussions about things like CFP moving forward or how many games we're going to play inside the conference, which is sort of family business, if you will. It doesn't really have anything to do with anybody else except when you talk about the CFP. Well, he's going to have solid answers, hopefully sooner rather than later, moving forward. So the way this all started was Greg stepped to the mic and essentially reminded everybody what those of us here in the SEC already know. And that is that life in the SEC is just different. And to act like it's not is, well, a little ridiculous.
Whether people want to agree with it or not, that's up to them. We can go through the analytics and show the rigor of our schedule is different than anyone else's, period. And we had a learning session in September at the CFP about strength of schedule, and strength of schedule isn't everything, but it is an important factor. And I remember very clearly one of the messages was, if you play the top ranked team and the 130th ranked team, those 2 games average out to 65.5. If you play 65 and 66, they average out to 65.5. And so the advisor said, you're just as well playing 65 and 66. Here's my problem. But for maybe 1, maybe 2 teams in a year, we don't have 65 or 66, and everybody else has a group. It's 60 and below. That has to be considered by us in making our schedule, by the CFP itself, and evaluating selection criteria.
Of course it does. There's nothing that Greg Sankey said right there that doesn't make sense. If you play in a tougher league, then that should be taken into account at a different weighted measure than a team that plays just 6-6 teams, or a team that doesn't play anybody inside the top 15 or doesn't play the top half of their conference. All the various ways this could shake out. Inside the SEC, because of the strength and the depth of the conference, you should be rewarded for playing a tougher schedule. That makes perfect sense to all of us here in SEC land. Honestly, I don't understand how it doesn't make sense to everybody else across the country. I could take a guess at it, though, and say, well, there's conference pride involved, and then there's, well, we just want to be able to say we bested the SEC, so give us every advantage possible. Down here, we don't view it that way. We're like, if you're good enough, let's go show it. And, you know, credit where it's due. Regardless of how they got into the playoff last year, the Big Ten represented themselves well once they got there. So we just have to live with those results. But 12 is not the answer. I have long been on the record as being somebody who is anti-playoff expansion for a number of reasons. 12 is too many. I think 2024 absolutely proved that it's too many. And now we're talking about moving on up to 16 somewhere down the line. That's going to be too many. We don't need that many. Greg Sankey, whatever else you might think of him, well, I'm happy about the fact that he agrees with me on this point.
Look at a track record. We didn't need 12. Had we stayed at 4, we would have had half the 4 last year. I don't need lectures from others about good of the game. I don't lecture others about good of the game. And coordinating press releases about good of the game. You know, again, okay, you can issue your press statement, but I'm actually looking for ideas to move us forward. The CFP and my colleagues have to understand there's something different here. We all play college football. And so while you ask that of me, I'll go back and say, we didn't need a 12-team college football playoff. Thought it was good for the game. I was involved in that. Others held it up. We don't apologize here. I'm proud we have 13 teams. I wish it was 14 in baseball. I'm proud of what we did in men's basketball. I'm proud that we have, I think it's 5 of 8. Is it 5 of 8 in softball? I actually think that can make other people better too.
I agree with Greg Sankey. The SEC is what it is, and there are no apologies for putting so many teams in the field the way they did in the other sports here around the calendar. And it's like Kirby Smart said last year, if you want some of this SEC, come on down here and play this schedule. See, Big Ten fans, they wanted to look at that and go, oh, we came and got some in the bowl game. Keep it. Keep it. You're embarrassing yourself when you say that. Clearly, he's talking about playing your way through the SEC schedule. It's different. And again, there are numbers to back it up. That's not somebody just sitting here saying something because of SEC pride or whatever. I'm not even one of those guys. I don't cheer for every SEC team just because. I cheer for the Georgia Bulldogs. And I acknowledge the reality that the SEC is the toughest conference to play through in all of college football. That's a simple fact. And that's one of the things that Kirby had in his mind when he stepped to the podium to give his take on what's going on with the CFP right now and where it might be headed.
Yeah, I think I have a good understanding of where it is and the decisions that have to be made, which I don't think those decisions get answered here. I think we all think this is like, we're going to have these answers when we come out of it. There's a lot of thinking heads, a lot of people that have to come together, a lot of agreeing that has to be done to get where we want to go. I think we have a small sample size right now of what we did. And we're going to get another sample size right this year under the similar format, maybe a little different with the seating part, but where it goes in the future, I don't know where that goes. And I'm not looking at it in a self-preservation mode, which happens a lot in college football. These meetings are that way, conferences are that way. I've learned from the best in the business that you're trying to constantly sustain the game and make the game better and not just do it for what's best for me or just for self-preservation. And I'm not saying that anybody is doing that, but I'm saying we got to look at it from that perspective. And that's hard. I look at women's softball, I look at men's basketball, and I look at men's baseball, and it just absolutely blows my mind how the SEC can end up with the teams they end up with in those positions. Okay, now some of those you can say are play-in because maybe they went through a regional, and you look at the women's softball World Series, you look at men's baseball, you look at men's basketball, 13 of 16, 14 of 16 in their larger pools. But when you look at what they're able to do, and there's no outcry, and there's nobody beating a drum saying that it's completely unfair. They do a lot of things based on RPI. They do a lot of things based on strength of schedule, and they reward teams for that. I have a hard time seeing Ole Miss, Alabama, and South Carolina not being in the best teams last year, and that for me is a big part of the SEC. And people want to say, well, you need to play 9 games, you need to play 8 games. We don't really know which one of those is until we know the playoff format. But I beg everybody in this room the question, would we have been better off not playing Clemson last year and playing another SEC game to make 9 games? How would that have been better for the SEC? How would that have been better for Georgia? I don't think it would have. I think those teams you play outside your conference verify your strength.
Is it better for the game, though?
If what?
If you don't play Clemson.
Well, I think it's better for the game if we play Clemson, absolutely. Right. But I think us playing Clemson did a lot of things for our conference, improved a lot of things for our conference. And, that's – people take that out of a context. They look at it and say, all they want to talk about is the 8 to 9. I mean, who are you playing with those games?
Are you afraid those games could go away? Georgia, Clemson, Texas, Ohio State, those kind of games?
I think you're going to see more and more of those games, regardless of the SEC, because that's what the fan base wants, what TV wants, and that drives revenue, and you're going to see lots of those opportunities out there.
One of the marquee weekends on the college football schedule here in the SEC has been the SEC championship game for several decades now. There is no debate. You look around the rest of college football, pick a conference, it doesn't matter. The Big Ten having to put tickets on sale for $10 a piece. The Pac-12 never going to fill a stadium. The Big 12 never going to fill a stadium for their championship weekend. The SEC is just different. There were a lot of us that took a lot of pride, not only in that fact, just simply because it was a bit of a coronation. Everybody knew this was the best conference in college football, and now the 2 best teams are going to square up on the field and see who is the champion. Well, the landscape has changed. Now we have essentially a regular season, round robin, and everybody tries to get to Atlanta, and it means something a little different, regardless of where college football goes. I am someone who enjoys that last game. I enjoy seeing the 2 best teams that have shown it over the course of the season come together and then pick a winner, like they play it out. It's clear. You can have bragging rights for an entire season, or an entire offseason, and in the SEC, that really matters. It just means more. Am I right? I, for one, am a fan of SEC championship games. I will always personally put a priority on them. Does that mean that college football as a whole is going to do that? I don't know. And I don't care, because I would love for Georgia to perform the best as they can perform and then make it back to Atlanta every year. If it doesn't shake out that way, so be it. But if there's an opportunity to go out there and win a championship, claim a trophy, or put another ring on the mantle, I want the Dogs to have that opportunity. And if they get there, then I sure want them to win the thing. And I get it. The season's long enough already. I get it. There's a risk of injury, just like we saw in Atlanta last year for Georgia. That's part of the game. I can leave it right there. There are no excuses. There is no way to say, well, if this, then that. Football is what it is. It is a violent sport. And when you win, it matters. Championships matter, especially down here in the SEC. So those are my thoughts on Championship Saturday. But, of course, Kirby had his own thoughts about it. And I want to make sure that we give him a chance to share those tonight as well.
I know a lot of that's going to be determined by television revenue. What's best for that championship weekend? Is it a play-in game? Is it like your baseball, regional, your softball regionals, and you play and you try to get yourself in? I don't want to devalue the regular season. I do think there's a lot of value in the regular season. I don't think a team that, I guess Texas last year, right? They're the 1 seed going into the SEC championship. I mean, there's some scenarios out there. I'm like, okay, they got a play-in game. I don't know if I agree with that. they can play a championship game or they can play a game, but there should be some value to a regular season in terms of what you perform and what you do. You don't see a regular season basketball champion go in the SEC tournament, play, and then not make the tournament. I mean, it's not going to happen, right? So we have a little more limited spots than they do. But I enjoy the SEC championship. I'm a firm believer in that, but I'm going to support whatever's the conference we choose to do in that format.
Wait. I'll get right back to the show. But I want to take this opportunity to let you know about the Ring the Bell newsletter. Each week, I break down the mindset, strategy, and culture behind Georgia's football dominance. But of course, that's not all. You'll also get exclusive podcast updates and episodes. You'll get deep dives about Kirby Smart and Georgia football, real-world lessons on leadership, content strategy, and growth, stories from the sidelines and the press box, and first looks at new content, free resources, and community drops. Not to mention my top hitters on social media every week. And oh yeah, there's the discounts. So are you in? Be the first to know. Be a part of the team. Join the program and sign up for the Ring the Bell newsletter in the description down below. This is not just a newsletter. It's a movement for dogs who lead. I told you there was a lot that was said in Destin this week, a lot being said. They're still down there. But it's just so much coming out at once that I wanted to break it out piece by piece. So that's how Kirby feels about Championship Saturday. But there's more to it. They ask him about how do you feel about whether or not we're going to see undefeated champions moving forward. And his answer, in my opinion, was one that was pretty obvious.
I like to say, yes, you will see fewer, but I would say it's not because of the schedule and the length of the schedule. It would be because of the portal and the lack of depth and the more parity. But as soon as I say that, if it depends on which things go, way things go in the next 6 to 10 months, you could end up with some haves and have-nots out there, and ultimately a team could drive prices and go buy a championship. Like you're talking about with the super team. I mean, I think we could see that if there's not parity.
Now, this is something that's been talked about a lot. It's one of the biggest fears of the NIL era, right? Can teams just throw enough money at it to claim a championship with their pocketbook? I don't know. I don't think it's there now. I don't think that's where we are today. There are too many factors involved and too much shifting sand out there. But I can absolutely get on board with what Kirby's saying here, that in the future, as this thing shakes out, these answers we still don't have from the court systems, once those things come together, it could very well create a landscape where you can have super teams and teams can just go buy championships, as it were, kind of like the Yankees used to do, when they just threw money at everything, bought the best players, and then, of course, they were going to win the World Series. Nobody wants that. I don't think anybody wants that. I don't think that's good for the game. I don't think it's good for the sport. But we're not there today, and hopefully that's not going to be the future we end up in. But so much of it is out of not only our hands, but the coaches' hands. We're all going to figure that part out together. Now, this was where, much like Greg Sankey sort of dropped the mic with the Big Ten in terms of, I don't need to be lectured about the good of the game. I am always thinking about the good of the game because of the position that I hold. That's essentially what he said. And it got everybody's attention in the college football world when that quote went out, when that soundbite went out. But Kirby had a few atomic bombs to drop of his own, and none were bigger than the one that he dropped talking about the transfer portal. Because as a leader in the sport, a thought leader in the game, and widely considered to be the top coach in all of college football, Kirby, there's a certain gravitas to his words, and he knows it. Like I've told you guys over and over and over, when he steps to the podium, he's going to tell us the truth. At least the truth as he sees it. He's going to tell us the truth about Georgia football and the truth as he sees it about college football as a whole. And that's exactly what he did in Destin this week when given the opportunity to talk about the transfer portal and how it should be handled. And honestly, I think most college football fans are going to be right there with him on this one.
Well, I'm so glad you asked. I need you to think for a second. There is a strong contingent. We had an AFCA meeting. We had a meeting in which we unanimously decided that there really needed to be one portal window. Whatever that is what it is. And it needs to happen sometime in January. There is an outcry. There is schools. There's different conferences that feel like it should not fall during the play-in season. I would love that. I would love to be able to play the season without it. Is basketball able to do that, or do they deal with the portal during their championship? I'm asking. During the tournament. What do we deal with during the final, let's call it maybe 4 teams? I don't know if I'm exactly right on that, but roughly we're down to 4. We deal with that. Okay, that's because of the academic calendar for us, where the academic calendar falls. And everybody doesn't have that incongruency. Oh, by the way, we had to deal with that multiple times. It's not fun. It's not fun. It's really hard to be playing in a championship setting and having to deal with that. But when I brought that up as a complaint or a problem, it was told to me, there's no crying from the yacht. So if you're going to play in these environments, you have to be willing to do that. Now it's, we can't do that. And then I got told, well, we have a cap year. Cap year runs July 1 to June. If the portal is in January, we can't manage our cap. We can't do our cap. Well, that's an accounting method you got to take into account. Some schools are trying to manage that and prepare for that. Why can't you just change when the cap year is? Because the settlement is going to determine the cap year. And it's going to be based on all the other sports within our sports programs, which is July 1 to the end of June. So I'm a big believer in what Coach Elko said. And I want to develop my team. I think it's really important in football to have your team at whatever date in January, whatever we decide that is. And then you work those guys out. You train those guys. You lift, you prepare, you do meetings, you do all this preparation, and then that's your team, right? Like that's your team. And I'm great with the money they make. I'm great with them being able to go in the portal. And if you ask kids when they would like to be able to go in the portal, they're going to say in January so they can go get started where? At their new place. But there's a large contingency that's growing now trying to push an April portal, maybe May. They want to practice in June, have some practices in June. I want you to think about June for us. We have 10 days of high school camp in June. We believe in using those. Across the Southeast, we use 10 days. Some schools use 10, some don't use any. We also have official visits every weekend. So now we're going to practice our team in that same window. Something's going to suffer. Needless to say, I'm a proponent for a January, wherever it fits window. And there's people saying, well, we can't get our kids in academically. Well, they're getting mid-year high school players in that same academic window. It's happening everywhere. So I'm a big believer in that. And I think that's the decision that has to be made, at least from a standpoint of SEC and bigger picture, the country. Where is the portal window, and is there 2 or is there 1? We're not here to complain about that. Like that's become the norm. Every time I come in here, we talk about December is absolutely crazy, right? Now, let's call it January, because hypothetically, the portal opened in December. We're leaning towards that thing being in January, and you get a little more stability in December in terms of let's sign our high school recruits first. Then let's figure out in January where the semester break ends, who's staying and who's going. So we compartmentalize. Let's deal with this issue now. Let's deal with this issue now. But we're talking about taking this issue this January and moving it out all the way to April. So you think tampering's a problem? Put that portal in April and see what teams do in January, February, and March. Just think about it now, because we're getting ready to make a big decision. And a lot of people believe, well, the kids won't be able to leave if we put it in April. They'll have to stay the next semester. Oh, no. They'll be on your campus getting tampered with, collecting 33% of your cap before they leave with it. Not for that.
That makes too much sense, right? How can college football not see that? How can you not do that? And I know they walked us through it. I have academics here. I want to practice there. Listen, maybe, but I'm not in those meetings. That guy's in those meetings. Greg Sankey's in those meetings. And listening to what they say, it makes too much sense. So I don't even want to really get to know what it is you're talking about, because clearly you are fighting for your school and your situation. That's great. Do that. But understand that for the basic college football fan out here and the college football coaches and ADs and commissioners who have to make all this run, this what they're talking about here just makes way too much sense. You get the thing done in January. You have a window to go. If you want to go, great, go. Get to your new school, do your thing. Then let's close it down, shut it down so that you can get out there, build your team, get ready for the upcoming year. And that way you know what your roster is. You know how to manage all the new numbers that they're coming out with, the 105 number, walk-ons, who has a scholarship, who doesn't, who needs to go into the portal, who wants to look at the portal, understanding that it's pretty barren out there. More and more student athletes are getting left by the wayside because they don't have a good place to go. That is the reality. Not everybody out here is going to jump in the portal and go get a bag. That's not how it's going down. Eventually, I'm hopeful that these young men, especially speaking about football, but young student athletes, are going to understand that the grass is not always greener, and it is better to sit your ass at home, put in some work, and try to do the best you can do where you are. Because that's how life rolls once you get out of college, I promise. So that's my 2 cents. I told you off the top here that Georgia is in a bit of a bizarro world, and you may not even realize it. As if all of these discussions are not bizarro enough, especially if you're not plugged in the way this community is. Then let's talk about some of the other stuff that broke over the last week or so that will make you fully understand how crazy it is out there outside of the season in college football. Let's take a look at what Athlon did. Somebody, somewhere, and frankly, my money is on the fact that it very well could have been Kirby Smart, was an anonymous coach that had this to say about Georgia football in the 2025 season. I don't think this is the same level of talent we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years in Athens. I think you might see a decline, at least at first, on both lines of scrimmage. Fair? I've said something similar, so fair on the decline, at least at the beginning, until they figure it out, and then they'll come back. In terms of the level of talent, I take umbrage there. I don't agree with that at all. They're talented. You just don't know their names yet, Mr. Athlon person. That's all. Give them a shot. Give them a chance. He continued. Defensively, it's still an elite group, fact, but they're thin at linebacker. Are you nuts? Are you out of your mind? Georgia has, hands down, the best linebacker room in the entire country. I don't think there's anybody even close. And they're not slowing down. They're recruiting another batch of athletes right now to come in here and chase these guys. So, yeah, they are still elite. But thin at linebacker, you are outside your mind with that statement, whoever you are. And then he continued, the biggest question mark will be their offense under Stockton. They didn't chase any portal guys. No, we didn't. So let's see if the kid can become elite. Okay, if elite is the standard, we'll find out. I've sat right here and told you. The thing that Gunnar Stockton has to do that we don't know is show us, can he go win the game when he needs to? Can he make the play when the game's on the line that a quarterback has to make if he is that kind of guy? If he's the dude, can he do that? We're going to find out. So fair enough. And I guess elite is the benchmark for Georgia. Good to know that everybody else views it that way. I know they view it that way inside the program. It offers a little perspective on how all of this has to be taken when you're talking about the Dogs. Oh, they're down. Maybe. It still means they're pretty doggone good if elite is your standard. But this statement, widely like panned across the college football world, because the linebacker point, I'm going to see a decline on the lines of scrimmage. And then, of course, the whole thing about Gunnar Stockton. Now, Gunnar Stockton is the low-hanging fruit. Everybody wants to say Georgia's down because of 14, because they lost to a Notre Dame team in a Sugar Bowl with all sorts of craziness going on around them. In a game that actually Gunnar Stockton played pretty doggone well in, but nobody wants to, see that. They don't want to see that. That's the easy punching bag to say that Georgia's going to be down. Well, we're all going to find out, but I'm telling you, this anonymous coach, what does the kids say? This isn't going to age well. I'm pretty sure about that. Pretty confident in that. But this is not where the free-flowing ink craziness, the bizarro world, stopped. Now, I want to preface this next bit by saying that the fellow who wrote the next little piece of information we're going to talk about here at ESPN, David Hill, I like David Hale, okay? Good college football writer. And if you read the entire article, this doesn't hit quite as hard. But in ESPN's breakdown of with 100 days out, here are some things you need to do. They talked about all sorts of stuff. Champions, Heisman contenders, and they talked about things you don't see coming, essentially is what they called it. Crazy predictions. They're right. This was crazy. Because David came right out and said, Georgia misses the playoff. For the better part of 3 seasons, the Bulldogs seemed invincible. Only an injury-plagued one-score loss to Alabama in the 23 SEC title game might have prevented Georgia from winning 3 straight national championships. As a Georgia fan, I'm going to sit here and go, fact. You give me a healthy Brock Bowers and a healthy Ladd McConkey, that's a different situation. But it went down the way it went down. And yet, by the end of 2024, it was clear some of the shine was off the once dominant program. Once dominant. Funny choice of words there, David. Carson Beck struggled without much help from his skill positions. Why is that? We've talked about it a lot here. Attrition, but it is what it is. The Dogs lost to Alabama, were whooped by Ole Miss. Absolutely. I called it. And nearly fell to Georgia Tech before escaping in 8 overtimes. Okay. By the time Notre Dame eased past Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, it was pretty clear Kirby Smart didn't have a championship level team. They were champions. Come on, Dave. So, will 2025 be a return to greatness? How are we measuring greatness here? Fair question. It's possible, but the SEC is stacked, and with games at Tennessee, home versus Alabama, Texas, Ole Miss, and the rivalry showdown with Florida, there are ample opportunities to stumble. Fair. Is 8-4 possible? Would a 9-3 Georgia be a sure bet for the playoff? Could things get worse? Things can always get worse, by the way. When the standard is dominance, it's hard to maintain the standard for long in today's college football. Nice saving grace way to button up this prediction. 8-4 would be sort of catastrophic because things would have to happen that, made us all very sad for Georgia to get to an 8-4 record, I think. Major injuries, things like that. 9-3, I sat here about a month ago and said, currently, I can make an argument for 9-3, or I can make an argument for undefeated. We'll get all, the predictions out of the way down the line. But it is bold to say that the team that has been who and what Georgia has been over the last few years is going to whiff on a 12-team college football playoff. It can absolutely happen, but it's bold. It's bold. And the games that they pointed to here, where they said these games are on the schedule at home, I think the at-home part is the part that's doing a lot of the work there. Yeah, they're good games. They're going to be tough matchups. At home matters for the Georgia Bulldogs under Kirby Smart. That's just a fact. And at Tennessee, well, we'll find out exactly what Tennessee is once the season gets here, because right now, I'm not real clear. But we're not done. Athlon, ESPN, all got some stuff to say. Everybody seems to want to question Gunnar Stockton, including the man everybody seems to love to hate, Paul Feinbaum. Kirby sat down with him yesterday and had a little something to say about a Paul Feinbaum prediction that, he kind of shot from the hip on an ESPN interview. And Kirby took him to task for it, as he should have.
Appreciate all your questioning of it because it just gives me a little extra.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm glad you missed an earlier interview I did on ESPN because I
Oh, I didn't miss it. I didn't miss it.
Okay.
Georgia will be fine or not fine with Gunnar Stockton now their starting quarterback.
I would say that's a big not fine. I know the team coalesced around him after the SEC championship game, but I was underwhelmed by what I saw from Gunnar Stockton in the Sugar Bowl loss to Notre Dame. I just always hope that when I say these things at a busy time like this, that you are not. But I'm looking at a man whose job it is to tell you what's being said, right?
Yeah, I'm excited. Gunnar got the message, man. He got the message. You did your job.
Okay. Listen, I have admired you and respected you for so many years.
Absolutely.
And I feel like at this point in your career, you need a little help from me.
I appreciate
to get
that.
you to the first game and over the finish line.
I'm glad you did. You've always been. That's why I always come on your show because I love the fact that you give me that motivation.
Attaboy, Kirby. It's all in good fun. It's all in good fun, but it's also very, very real. Gunnar got the message. I think Gunnar's been getting that message. I think the kid from the hills up there where I was born and raised or nearby, I think it means a little something to him. And I think sitting here today that when he has his opportunity this fall, Gunnar's going to show everybody that one of those back home recipes that he's really good at serving up is a little something called humble pie with a dash of crow on the side, maybe. Just a feeling. It is nuts out there this time of year when you're talking about college football, and especially around our Georgia Bulldogs. And so I felt like it was the perfect time to set in here and put it all on the table for you so that in the future, when these people come talking and they got something they want to say, you can say, I've heard it all, I've seen it all. And my coach makes the most sense, and I'm good with my guys. And we'll let everything else play itself out on the field. It's a bizarro world out there in college football. Things are crazy, especially around our Georgia Bulldogs. But if we've learned anything over the last 10 years, it is that Kirby Smart and his Georgia Bulldogs football program are the one steady rock in a crazy sea that is college football. They are going to do what they do because they are built on a solid foundation from the ground up. All of this is going to work itself out once we kick the ball off in the fall. But for now, tell your friends you got to hold on tight because there's some crazy stuff out there. You just can't let it get to you. You got to take it for what it is and just keep it moving. And go Dogs!
How about them fucking dogs? That's what I told them.